The mornings the world feels reborn. The light hits the water just right, the air smells clean, and the past feels like something that happened to someone else. That morning was like that. It had been 3 months since the court case. The HOA had gone quiet, not the polite kind of quiet, but the defeated kind. The subdivision meetings dwindled, the drone surveillance stopped, and even Linda's pristine white SUV stopped showing up near my fence line. The silence was different now, not empty, earned. I'd spent the past few weeks fixing up the dock, rebuilding the old shed, and painting a sign that now stood proudly near the lake. Private property, UST 2019, Freedom Lake. If you can see this sign, you're already where you shouldn't be. Every letter was carved by hand, every nail hammered with satisfaction. I took my coffee down to the dock, sat in my usual chair, and just watched the world wake up. The lake rippled gently. A heron stood on one leg near the far reeds, motionless and wise. Then I heard the sound I loved most, the low growl of the jet ski engine. I smiled, not because I was about to ride, but because that sound had become a symbol. 3 months ago it was noise. Now it was freedom, roaring back into its rightful home. Sometimes, when I tell people about what happened, they think it's just a story about an HOA, about petty rules and one stubborn man who wouldn't give in. But it's not really about that. It's about something deeper, about how the world's getting smaller every day, how people want everything labeled, controlled, regulated, made uniform. But the truth is, freedom doesn't live in fences or rule books. It lives in moments, like the wind across a private lake, or the way the sun glints off an old dock you built with your own hands. It lives in being left alone. My father used to say, "Son, some folks are born needing to control. Others are born needing to breathe." I never understood that until now. Linda and her HOA, they didn't hate me, not really. They hated what I represented, a man who didn't need permission, a piece of land that didn't answer to a committee, a reminder that some things can't be owned twice. About a week ago, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. No seal, no threat, no lawyer talk. Just a handwritten note. "Mr. Dalton, you were right. I let rules make me forget what peace felt like. I've resigned from the board. Enjoy your lake. It's beautiful." Linda, I didn't frame it. Didn't burn it either. I just tucked it in the back of the same folder where I kept all the old HOA papers. Proof that even the loudest noise can turn into silence if you stand your ground long enough. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, I took one last ride on the jet ski. The water was smooth as glass. The spray hit my face like rain. As I circled the lake, I caught my reflection on the surface, small against the horizon, but free in every direction. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my victory. It was my father's. It was every farmer, every rancher, every homeowner who'd ever been told, "You can't," by someone holding a rule book instead of a heart. I slowed the jet ski and let the engine idle. The world went quiet again. Just the gentle lap of water against the dock, the echo of thunder far away, and the whisper of wind through the trees. Peace, real peace. And this time, it wasn't fragile. It was mine. Epilogue. If you ever drive through Willow Creek now, you'll see that the HOA sign is gone. The houses still stand, perfect and neat, but the air feels lighter somehow. And if you take the old dirt road that winds east for 2 miles, you'll come to a gate with a wooden sign that says, "Freedom Lake, keep out unless invited." Behind that gate lives a man who once fought a war made of paper and noise, and won it with patience, proof and principle. He doesn't ask for trouble anymore, but he's never forgotten how it sounds when freedom fights back. When you fight a snake, you don't step on its tail. You grab it by the head, and by now, I knew exactly where the HOA's head was, their board meetings. So one bright Thursday morning, I decided to attend one. No, I wasn't a member, but the flyers they kept nailing to my fence had public session printed right on them. I figured I'd take them up on the invitation. I cleaned my boots, ironed a shirt for once, and drove my old Ford into Willow Creek. The roads looked identical. Every mailbox the same dull beige. Every lawn clipped within half an inch of uniformity. The air smelled like artificial perfection and expensive fertilizer. At the community hall, I walked in with my hat low and my grin ready. About 20 people sat in neat rows, whispering like pigeons. At the front table sat the Queen herself, Linda. Her eyes nearly popped out when she saw me. "Mr. Dalton," she said, voice tight as barbed wire, "this meeting is for residents only." I smiled. "Oh, I'm aware. I just came to thank you all for the entertainment. The flyers, the trespassing, the drone surveillance. Real neighborly of you." The room went still. A few members shifted in their chairs. I pulled a manila folder from my jacket and set it on the table. Inside are photos, videos, and certified county records proving that you've been trespassing, harassing, and filing fraudulent claims. I've also copied the sheriff's office and the county attorney. Linda's lips went pale. You can't threaten us." "Threaten?" I laughed. "Ma'am, I'm just informing you. That's what y'all do best, right?" The room erupted in murmurs. Someone in the back chuckled. Linda tried to regain control. "This is highly inappropriate. The HOA has authority, not on private land," I cut in. "You might control mailbox paint and lawn heights, but that lake, it's mine. You step on it again, you'll be swimming in lawsuits." The man sitting beside her, I think he was the treasurer, looked over the documents, frowned, and whispered something to her. She didn't answer. She just sat there, stone still, staring at me like I'd defied gravity. I tipped my hat. "Appreciate your time, folks. Have a good meeting," and I left. That night I couldn't stop smiling. It felt good, real good, but I wasn't done yet. See, I'd learned something from all this HOA nonsense. Their power didn't come from truth. It came from perception. If enough people believed their rules applied, they did. So I decided to flip the script. The next weekend I put up a brand new sign at the start of my driveway. "Welcome to Dalton Lake Community, private HOA zone. Rules: jet skis mandatory on weekends. Loud music after 10 p.m. encouraged. Free fishing for everyone except Karen types." I made sure to angle it perfectly toward the road where Linda drove by every morning. It worked better than I'd hoped. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook with laughing neighbors from miles around. Word spread fast. Apparently even the sheriff saw the photo online and called it the best thing he'd seen all month. But the cherry on top came 2 days later. A local news crew showed up. They'd heard about the HOA feud gone wild and wanted to interview the country guy who beat the system. I told them the truth, calm, polite, no exaggeration. Just facts, the false claims, the trespassing, the drone. I even handed them copies of the official property maps. By evening, the segment aired, "HOA claims private ranch. Owner proves otherwise in legendary showdown." It went viral. The next morning, Linda's HOA mailbox was flooded with public outrage. People called them bullies, tyrants, even joked about nominating me for president of the anti-HOA League. By the end of the week, the Willow Creek HOA had issued a formal apology for any misunderstanding and quietly removed all references to my property from their documents. But I wasn't naive. Knew this wasn't about one woman or one board. It was about people who thought rules made them powerful, and what happens when someone reminds them that freedom isn't up for committee approval. That evening, I sat on my dock, feet dangling over the calm water. A beer in my hand, the lake shimmered orange under the sunset. The jet ski sat quietly beside me, reflecting the light like a silver promise. Somewhere far off, I could almost hear the faint hum of suburban silence. All those uniform houses tucked neatly into their perfect boxes. Let them keep their rules. I had my lake, and no committee in the world could take that from me. It started with a letter, heavy paper, embossed seal, the kind lawyers use when they want you to feel small. Notice of civil action. Willow Creek Homeowners Association versus James Dalton, claiming unauthorized use of community waterway and endangerment of shared resources. I stared at it for a long time. The sky outside was dark with rolling clouds. The first drops of rain splattered the envelope like punctuation marks of bad news. I shouldn't have been surprised. Linda and her board couldn't handle losing in public. The viral video had embarrassed them, and people like that didn't forgive. They reorganize, refile, and retaliate. But this time, I wasn't going to fight them alone. I called a friend, Rachel Hendricks, a sharp local attorney who'd handled property disputes for ranchers her entire life. She spoke in precise words, like she was cutting wire with her tongue. After reading the complaint, she smirked. They're bluffing. But it's a dangerous bluff. They're hoping you won't show up so they can get a default judgment. Oh, I'll show up, I said. Rachel leaned back. Good. Let's remind them what owning something actually means. 2 weeks later, we walked into the county courthouse. Fluorescent lights, stale air, the kind of place where truth feels negotiable. Linda sat across the aisle, hair pinned tight, pearls shining like battle armor. Her lawyer, some slick city guy, looked ready to bill her for breathing. The judge was old and quiet. He read through the files, brow furrowing deeper with each page. Rachel spoke first. Calm, measured. Your Honor, the HOA's claim is built on outdated plats that no longer exist. My client owns every inch of that land, including the lake. We have certified records, surveyor statements, and the county's acknowledgement. The judge nodded. Mr. Dalton, this property, you acquired it from the Buchanan Land Trust? Yes, sir, I said. Paid full price. I even rebuilt the fence line myself, Linda's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the HOA's records show the lake as a communal zone. Our client simply enforces environmental safety standards. Rachel handed over a photograph. This, she said, is their enforcement, drone surveillance, trespassing and harassment. All on private property. The judge stared at the image. 2 HOA members hiding in bushes with clipboards. He didn't say a word for a full 10 seconds. Then he looked at Linda. Ma'am, are you aware you and your associates could face criminal trespass charges? Her composure cracked. We thought it was within our rights. It wasn't, the judge said flatly. And you're fortunate Mr. Dalton showed restraint. He scribbled a note, signed the bottom, and slid the paper across the desk. Case dismissed. HOA to pay court costs. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Rachel smiled faintly. Told you. Paper snakes die easy once you cut the head off. When I stepped outside, rain had stopped. The world smelled new again. For a long moment I stood on the courthouse steps and let it sink in. The fight, the noise, the endless letters and false claims. All gone. But as much as this was victory, it wasn't just about winning. It was about why I'd fought in the first place. That lake wasn't just a piece of property. It was my father's dream. He'd worked that land decades ago, before illness took him. He used to tell me, land don't belong to you, son. You belong to it. You just take care of it for the next in line. That's why I couldn't back down. It wasn't pride. It was promise. When I drove back to the ranch that evening, the clouds broke open. The lake glittered beneath a pale sunset, the water calm as glass. I walked down to the dock, touched the old cedar railing my father built and whispered, "We kept it. Dad." A frog croaked somewhere near the reeds. Fireflies blinked in the distance. The world was quiet again. True freedom, I realized, isn't just about owning land. It's about owning your peace and some battles. You fight not because you want to, but because silence isn't freedom if it's forced. That night, I filed every court paper in a folder marked victory and locked it in my desk. I thought the story was over, but out there, in the polished homes of Willow Creek, lights still burned late into the night. And somewhere behind those windows, a certain woman wasn't done losing. The day piece was interrupted when I first bought the ranch. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. 200 acres of rolling fields, a quiet lake in the middle, and a small cabin that smelled like pine and freedom. After years of city noise, HOA letters, and neighbors arguing about mailbox colors, I was finally done with all of it. Out here, there were no committees, no shared property regulations, just me, the land, and the lake. That lake was my favorite part. Every morning, mist floated above the surface like a soft ghost, and when the sun rose, it turned the whole place into a golden mirror. I named it Freedom Lake not because it sounded poetic, but because that's exactly what it was. Freedom, one Saturday afternoon. After a long week of fixing fences and clearing brush, I decided to take the jet ski out. The water was calm, the air warm, and the engine's roar echoed across the empty hills. It was the sound of joy, but apparently not everyone liked joy. About 30 minutes into my ride, I noticed a white SUV parked near the old dirt road that led to my property line. It wasn't familiar. A woman in a sun hat stood beside it, pointing her phone directly at me like she was recording. I slowed down, frowning. Maybe she was lost. When I got closer to the shore, she waved her arms and shouted, "You can't do that here. This is HOA property." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She stomped toward the edge of the lake, her shoes sinking slightly into the mud. "This lake is under community regulation. No motorized vehicles are allowed. I'm calling the cops." For a moment, I thought she was joking. "Ma'am," I said, cutting the engine. "This is my lake, my land. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me. This is the Willow Creek Community Zone. We have rules." I felt a cold ripple of irritation under my skin. Willow Creek. I'd heard of it, a newly built subdivision about 2 miles north. Some rich developer had tried to buy up land near my ranch, but failed because mine was privately held. Apparently, this woman hadn't gotten the memo. "Call whoever you want," I said finally. "But you're trespassing right now." She glared at me, pulled out her phone and started dialing. I didn't even try to stop her. I just sat there on my jet ski, waiting as the sun dipped lower behind the hills. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up beside her SUV. A young deputy stepped out, hat tilted low, hand resting near his belt. The woman, I learned later her name was Linda, marched right up to him, pointing at me like she'd just caught a criminal. "That man's violating community water laws," she said. "He's disturbing the peace and damaging shared resources." The deputy glanced at me, then at the lake, then back at her. "Ma'am, can you clarify where the community boundary line starts?" Linda huffed. "Right here. This whole area." That's when I decided to end the comedy show. I walked up the small slope, wiped my hands on my jeans, and pulled a folded paper from my pocket. "Deputy, my name's James Dalton. Here's the property deed. Been in my name for 3 years. County records show the entire lake and surrounding 100 acres belongs solely to me." The deputy studied the document carefully. Then he pulled out his own tablet, typed something in and frowned. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "he's telling the truth. This lake isn't part of any HOA jurisdiction. You're standing on his property." Linda froze. "That's impossible. Our HOA map shows—" "Your map is wrong," the deputy interrupted, firm now. "You're trespassing." I tried not to smile, but I couldn't help it. The deputy turned to me. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir." "You have a good day." Then he looked back at her. "Ma'am, I suggest you head home before I have to file a trespassing report." She stood there, speechless, her perfect suburban confidence cracking like thin glass. I started my jet ski again, the engine roaring like victory itself. As I tore across the lake, spray flying behind me. I could see her car disappearing up the dusty road, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. HOA people never gave up that easily. They say peace doesn't leave all at once. It trickles away, like water slipping through cracks you didn't know were there. After the jet ski incident, I figured that woman, Linda, would crawl back to her HOA meetings and complain about something else, maybe mailbox paint, or a neighbor's unmowed lawn. But I was wrong. A week later, strange things began to happen. It started small, and flyers. Neatly folded papers stuck to my gatepost, held by tape that left residue like a scar. Notice of violation, unapproved use of community waterway. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association requires all residents to adhere to HOA bylaws regarding noise, watercraft and lake preservation. At the bottom, there was a fine, $500 per day of violation. I laughed when I first saw it. Then I burned it, but 2 days later there were more. Stuffed in my mailbox, tucked under my truck's windshield, even nailed to my fence. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was intrusion. The final straw came when I found a drone hovering over the lake one morning. It buzzed like a giant mosquito dipping low over my dock, filming me while I drank coffee. I grabbed my rifle. Now I didn't shoot it, but I aimed, and that was enough to make it fly off fast. The next day, a letter arrived by certified mail, a formal HOA warning. They claimed they had video evidence of me threatening HOA property inspectors. On my land, that night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with the lights off, listening to the crickets and staring out over the lake. Every ripple in the water looked like movement. Every rustle in the trees sounded like someone watching. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. I started researching Willow Creek's development history. Turns out, when the HOA was formed, they'd used outdated county maps that still included parts of my property under the name of a defunct land trust. My ranch, including the lake, had been privately sold 3 years before the HOA was even registered. To them, I was an uncooperative resident who refused to bow down to their bylaws. To me, they were parasites gnawing at the edges of my peace. So I decided to push back. I drove down to the county clerk's office and requested certified property maps, ownership history, and recorded boundaries. Then I asked the clerk, an old-timer named Bill, if he'd ever heard of Willow Creek's claims. He laughed so hard he almost spilled his coffee. Son, those folks think the sun rises because their board votes for it. Don't let 'em mess with you. If they bother you again, you call me. I'll personally show up with the records. That gave me an idea. 2 days later, I set up cameras, high-resolution trail cams hidden around the gate and shoreline. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Sure enough, the following weekend, 2 HOA board members came sneaking through the brush at dawn, carrying clipboards and a tape measure. They didn't know they were on camera. I didn't confront them. I just watched the footage later. One of them even urinated behind my barn. I uploaded the video to a private drive, labeled it Evidence Trespassing HOA, and waited. When the next violation notice arrived, I sent back a polite letter of my own to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. You are hereby notified that your representatives have trespassed multiple times on private land owned by James Dalton. All further unauthorized entry will be considered a criminal act and reported accordingly. Attached, photographic and video evidence. Regards, James Dalton, property owner. 3 days of silence followed. Then the deputy from before, same young man. Name tag said D. Morales, showed up again. He looked tired. Mr. Dalton, he said. The HOA filed a noise complaint and a report of menacing behavior. I sighed. You can see my cameras, right? Check the timestamps. He nodded, scratching his chin. Yeah, looks like they're trying to build a case against you. But from what I see, you're in the clear. They're crossing the line. Then he added something I didn't expect. Word of advice? Don't underestimate them. Some of these HOAs, they've got lawyers who live for this stuff. I thanked him. But his warning stuck with me. As he drove off, I looked at the water shimmering in the afternoon sun. It used to feel like peace. Now it felt like a battlefield, and I wasn't about to lose.